If you want to drive safer on snow and ice, there's really only one thing you need to do, and that is slow down. But let's be honest, you're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. There are a few things you can do in a car that are more fun than sliding sideways through a corner covered in snow and ice. But there is a fine line between having a great time and high centering your car on a snowbank. This past week, Toyota invited me and a handful of other people out to the Bridgestone Winter Driving School in Steamboat Springs, where we learned how to drive fast on snow and ice. We learned the fundamentals, some basic techniques, and we capped it off with a race to see who was the fastest. And I don't want to give away the end, but it was me. I was the fastest. I know you're probably thinking that the best place to learn how to drive on the ice is from a YouTuber who lives in Southern California, but in reality there are better places to learn, like the Bridgestone Winter Driving School in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Fortunately for you, I have absorbed all of the important teachings, and I will transfer them to you now with the power of the internet. I'm also going to add in a bunch of engineering because I'm a nerd, and so are you. This school has been around for a few decades. Every winter they smooth out a track in the snow, blast it with 1 million gallons of water from a nearby pond, and make a course of ice and snow with a variety of turns, banking, and elevation that can mimic the gnarliest winter weather conditions. I grew up in a place that occasionally has ice, and I did live in Denver for a winter, and trust me when I say that I took every opportunity to find an empty parking lot or a back road and drive like a lunatic on the ice and snow. And so I know pretty well that you can rotate the back of the car with the parking brake, and I know you can make the driven wheels break loose by mashing on the throttle. But we didn't really go over these techniques in the class. These are the techniques of a caveman or a teenager who is about to rip off a corner of his car on an ice-covered snowbank. We learned about balance. The more weight you put on a tire, the more grip that tire has. You can change the amount of weight on each tire by changing the balance of the car, shifting the weight to the front axle, the rear axle, or one side to the other. This is the one-sentence summary. To drive fast in winter conditions, you adjust your speed to the condition, you pick your trajectory, and then you adjust the balance of your car to get around the corner as fast as possible. A lot of driving fast in snow and ice is oversteering, so just a quick refresher. Let's say you take this corner every day with the steering wheel turned this much and everything is great. But one day you have to poop real bad, so you go into the corner way too fast with the same steering input. One of two things will happen. One, your car won't turn enough. Your front tires will just slide. This is called understeer, because your car is steering under what it should for the input that you've given. The second possibility is that the rear end of the car starts to slide and your car turns more than it normally would. This is called oversteer. Oversteer is controllable. If you know what you're doing, you could literally drive everywhere oversteering all the time, and the only problem you'd have is the line of police cars behind you. Understeer is way less controllable, also less fun. The first day started early in the morning when the temperature was -3 degrees Fahrenheit, which I can only assume is the coldest it has ever been anywhere ever. We started off with some stops, just getting up to speed and then mashing on the brakes, first with ABS and then without. The forerunners here are set up with a switch that turns off the ABS, actually all the driving aids. So with the flip of a switch, you can go from 2025 technology to 1995, and the dashboard lights up with dissatisfaction. One of the first things we learned is that your tires have traction only when they are rolling, specifically when they are rolling the same speed of the car in roughly the same direction as the car is traveling. When they stop rolling, you just slide in whatever random direction you are already heading. ABS allows the tires to keep rolling enough so that they maintain enough traction so you can still steer. We tried to do the same thing by manually pressing and releasing the brakes, which was less effective. The next thing we did was very helpful in understanding the exercises that came later in the class. We just drove around in a circle while trying to keep the same steering angle. It wasn't a flat circle, so we had to constantly adjust our speed up and down, but here's the cool part. If the car wasn't turning, instead of steering more, we just let off the throttle. The weight of the car would shift forward onto the front tires would gain grip, the rear tires would lose grip, and the car would turn more. If the car was turning too much, we just hit the throttle a little bit to shift the weight to the rear, and the opposite would happen. So we could switch the car between oversteer and understeer just by changing the balance of the car. Alright, enough with the boring fundamentals. Let's do some slides. If you're at all interested in unpaved motorsports, you're probably familiar with the Scandinavian flick. It's where you go into a corner by turning the wrong direction first and then back the direction you want to go. Here's how to do it. The first step is to let off the throttle. That shifts the car weight to the front and gives your front tires some grip. Then you steer the opposite way you want to turn, in this case to the right. What you're doing here is loading up the suspension on one side of the car. You're basically winding up a spring. Then you quickly steer the opposite direction and the car snaps back to the left, oversteering. There is another thing you have to keep in mind though. Remember before when I said that you only get traction when your tires are rolling in roughly the same direction you're traveling? Well, to get the car to snap back to the left, you have to steer a lot. So your front tires get pointed way too far and they're not getting any traction. As soon as the car pivots, you start unwinding the steering wheel so that your tires are mostly pointing in the direction the car is traveling. It's pretty neat to feel the front tires start to gain traction as you get them pointed in the right direction. After a few tries, once I got this down, I could really feel the weight transfer. You can feel when the car is wound up on one side, and then you know it's time to release the spring by quickly steering to the other side. I loved this exercise. I could do it all day, which is good because we did it a lot, and with different cars. And it was very interesting to see how different cars with different drivetrains behaved. All cars have all-wheel stop, and being able to stop is pretty important, so don't think that all-wheel drive makes you invincible. But it is great in the snow. It allows you to get moving from a stop on an icy patch, and it helps you to better control the direction of your car. I've always been a fan of rear-wheel drive, but after this trip, on snow and ice at least, I am fully team all-wheel drive. I got to drive 3 very different kinds of all-wheel drive systems for this class, and there was a significant difference in the driving experience for each of them. I know some people like to split up all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, but I'm just going to lump them together for this discussion. Feel free to complain in the comments. The first thing we drove was the 4Runner. As most of you know, I own a 4Runner and I love it. My 4Runner and the ones in this class all have a locking center and rear differential. There's no smarts here in how the power is sent to the wheels. The locking diffs will ensure that at least 2 of the wheels are spinning with the center locker and at least 3 with the center and rear. But it'll always be the wheels with the least traction. The 4Runners were super fun out here, partly because you can just put them in 2-wheel drive and lock the rear differential and just drift around like a lunatic. Then when you get stuck, you just throw it into 4-wheel drive, turn on the A-track, and crawl your way out. They're also super fun because the center of mass is high, so you can really shift the weight around. We also drove the new Camry. The Camry is a hybrid with a 2.5 liter and 2 electric motors on the front axle, but if you get the all-wheel drive version, you get a 3rd electric motor that just drives the rear wheels. This one was not super fun to drive, partly because the electronic controls were too good at keeping the car straight and on track. The fun part about driving in the snow and ice is being a little bit sideways, and this car doesn't like to be too sideways. If this sort of ice sliding is exactly what you don't want to do, then this is the car for you. But if you're watching this channel, you're probably more interested in something like the GR Corolla. I'll be honest, I've been sleeping on the GR Corolla, but this car was easily the most fun to drive out here. Yes, more fun than the GR86 and even the Supra. The Supra is a great sports car, but it just has too much power to be fun on the ice. Plus the wheelbase is short and the center of mass is low, so it was hard to practice the car balance techniques we learned in this class. The GR86 was a better car for this with its slightly longer wheelbase and more controllable power. Rear-wheel drive cars are really fun in the snow and ice, but the fun sort of maxes out quickly. The GR Corolla is a proper all-wheel drive system, a pretty impressive one at that. With the locking differentials in the 4Runner, there's no smarts in how the power is sent to the wheels. Unlocked is fine for the road, locked is fine for the trail, but on snow and ice, it's nice to have a little more control over where the power goes. For the side-to-side split, the GR Corolla has Torsen limited slip differentials on both axles. For the front-to-rear split, Toyota designed a pretty clever system. You can select the split you want, sending 60% of the power to the front wheels or 70% to the rear wheels, or split it evenly 50-50. How Toyota engineered this is pretty cool. They have a slightly different gearing on the rear axle than the front, so the front axle is actually moving a tiny bit slower. 0.7% slower. In between, there's a clutch pack that adjusts the amount of slip and therefore the amount of torque that goes to each axle. It's pretty cool, and overall this car is surprisingly good. So yeah, all-wheel drive is great in the snow, but pick your flavor of all-wheel drive carefully because they are very different. The Scandinavian flick is pretty great, but not always the fastest way around a corner. Sometimes you just want the front to grip a little more so you can rotate just enough to get around the corner. For this, we have left foot braking. Why with the left foot? Because you still want to be on the gas with your right foot. This works on front-wheel drive cars and all-wheel drive cars with a front bias. When you hit both pedals in one of these cars, the driven wheels keep spinning because the engine overpowers the brakes, but the non-driven wheels, or in the case of all-wheel drive, the wheels that get less power, slow the car down. This requires some finesse, but it does work and you can feel it happening. Just a little brake pedal into a small corner will let the rear wheels slow down while maintaining the grip on the front wheels, causing the car to pivot. It's pretty cool to feel it happen. Later in the morning, we did the most fun thing, 180-degree turns, both forward and reverse. Reverse is super easy, and if you're anything like me, you did this a dozen times when you were a teenager, one time banging into a curb and bending the steering linkage on your crappy old Chrysler. It's even easier on the snow. You just get up to about 20 or so miles per hour in reverse, quickly steer the opposite direction you want the car to spin, and when you're about halfway around, you steer back straight. If you're quick, you can get the transmission into drive before you stop rotating. You actually don't even really need to steer back straight. If you just let go of the wheel about halfway through, it will find its way back to center. Forward 180s are more difficult. I got the hang of it eventually, mostly, but we all struggled with them. To do a forward 180, you just do a Scandinavian flick, but you let it keep rotating. Remember when I said the last part of a Scandinavian flick is to unwind the steering wheel so your front tires are pointed more in the direction the car is traveling? Well, with a forward 180, you just do that later. It also helps if you keep your foot in the throttle to keep the wheels spinning. It seems like you would need a lot of speed to make this work, but the times I didn't get it right were the times I was going too fast. When you mash on the throttle, your car accelerates forward. When you go around a corner, your car accelerates sideways. As far as physics is concerned, it's the same thing. Force equals mass times acceleration. Around a corner, your acceleration is a function of how fast you're going and how tight the corner is, your velocity and the corner radius. Velocity is squared, which just means a little more velocity requires a lot more cornering force. That cornering force comes from your tires. Your tires are pointed this way, but they're actually traveling this way. The difference is called your slip angle. If you drive on racetracks, you should know what this chart is. It's one of the more important charts in auto racing. This axis is your tire slip angle, and this vertical axis is basically how much cornering force your tire can generate. The faster you go around a corner, the more slip you get, the more grip your tire has, and the faster you go. Up to a point. This point. After this point, if you try to go faster around that corner, your tire gets less grip and you end up losing traction. If you've ever gone into a corner too fast at a racetrack, you've felt this. If you've ever slid through a corner on ice, you've also felt this, but a lot slower. This is what the chart looks like on pavement, and this is what it looks like on ice. The total grip is way lower, but the peak is also at a different slip angle. If you're going into a corner on ice with your steering wheel turned and your car is not turning, your brain will tell you that you are here, because your brain has spent a lot of time driving on the pavement. But on ice, you might be here. And if you turn the steering wheel more, you just move away from the peak where you have the most traction. What you want to do is steer less. Sometimes you can't steer less because on the outside of the corner there is a wall, and that is when you should have planned better. Here's where it gets funky. Snow does weird things to this curve because snow moves. Dirt, mud, and gravel also move. So when you go around a corner on one of these surfaces, your tire creates a rut and it shovels the snow or dirt away with the knobs of the tires. So this curve in soft snow kind of looks like this, meaning you can get a lot of cornering force if you just have a lot of slip angle. If you've ever wondered why race cars on dirt are always sliding sideways while race cars on pavement aren't, it's because of this. There are two tricky parts to this. The first is that different types of snow do different things to this curve. Light snow, hard-packed snow, deep snow, slushy snow, it's all different. The second is that this high slip angle grip doesn't work on ice, not unless you have studs in your tires. So if you're going around a corner with a lot of oversteer in the snow and you hit a patch of ice, suddenly you're way on the backside of the curve and you have no grip. This highlights the biggest challenge when driving fast in snow and ice: inconsistency. On a paved road in the winter, you could have one spot with no ice or snow, followed by some snow, followed by a patch of ice, and your available tire traction changes wildly in a short distance. Even on this course, the traction difference between ice and snow is significant, and the cars in front of you will change the course as they drive over it. Even with just one car, you will change the course as you go, brushing off snow and exposing bare ice below. We were doing all this driving on winter tires, specifically Bridgestone Blizzaks. I've never bought winter tires, so I'm not going to pretend to know how these compare, but I do know in chatting with my friends from the north that Blizzak is almost as synonymous with winter tires as Kleenex is with tissues, or Band-Aid is to whatever you call a generic Band-Aid. Either way, the grip was surprising, particularly on ice, and I do know the single best thing you can do to make your car safer in the snow is to buy a set of proper snow tires. We finished up the class with a race between all the students. The course started with a reverse 180 and followed about a dozen corners, a couple notable ice patches, and some decent elevation change. It was a great mix of features and techniques, a reverse 180 into a Scandinavian flick into a couple of left foot braking turns. I may have used the handbrake a few times, and the fluffy snow on the outside of the corner worked well to keep my slides from getting too sideways. The ice was unnerving, but once I slid out into the soft snow, I could mash the throttle, accelerate through the corner, and ruin the track for everyone who raced after me. I gotta be honest, when you show up at an event like this and tell everyone your name is Superfast Matt, there is some amount of pressure to not be slow. You know how embarrassing it would be for a guy named Superfast to come in fourth? Fortunately, I lived up to the name and posted the fastest time. I did get to go first, so I had the best conditions, so maybe I just cleaned off the snow and left ice patches for everyone else. Or maybe I'm just the best.
Well, Dick, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple.
The Bridgestone Winter Driving School is fantastic. Honestly, one of the most fun things I've done in a while, and my job is basically to do fun stuff. Highly recommend it if you want to be a safer driver on snow and ice, and also if you want to be a faster race car driver on all kinds of tracks. You can change the balance of any car the same way we did here. It's just that when you do it on snow and ice, you get a much better feel for what the car is doing. It's sort of like racing on a track in slow motion. Cornering on pavement comes with high G-forces that drown out the subtleties of your effect on the car's balance. If your track car is oversteering, you fix it with setup, changing sway bars or adjusting suspension preload. On ice and snow, you just adjust the balance with the pedals, and after you do that a few times, you'll feel it on your track car, and you'll realize you can do the same thing there. And believe me when I tell you that understanding all of the things I'm telling you here will not make you a better driver on ice and snow. Every single time our instructor would tell us about our next exercise, I would understand what she was saying, and I would understand the mechanics behind it, but I never got it right until I did it several times. If you really want to be fast on the ice and snow, you're going to have to go sign up for a class. Used to be that you had to impress people to get people to watch your show, but now all you have to do is impress the algorithm. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It actually helps the channel a lot. And of course, all hail the algorithm.